Ready to roll? Yeah.
All right, let's get started. Nick, can you hit record? Perfect. So welcome everyone to our webinar on building community in and around affordable housing. My name is Violet. I'm the communication specialist with HomeEd. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. I know it's everybody's lunch hour. We really appreciate it. We're super excited to have everyone here. Our speakers today will be Nick Lilley, who's the CEO of HomeEd, and Laura Cunningham-Shpeley, the Executive Director of Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues. As you may know, this webinar is in support of Edmonton's Housing Month, which really aims to raise awareness around housing challenges, provide information and resources to increase social literacy on homelessness and the related challenges that we see today. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to recognize that we are gathered on Treaty 6 territory here in Edmonton, home to the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, and many others. And just to acknowledge the importance of the treaty, as well as our responsibility to these communities in supporting and helping to create necessary social change. Just a quick note on our Q&A process. So our lovely speakers have a presentation for you, and then at the end, we'll try our best to answer as many questions as possible, time permitting. To ask a question, in the bottom right hand of your screen, you'll see meeting tools. It looks like a little 3x3 square of circles. Under there, there's a Q&A option, and you can just put your questions right into that chat. All right, over to you, Nick.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Violet. Thank you, Laura, for joining me today. And thanks everyone who's online and interested in today's topic. I just want to kick off by just telling a quick little bit about HomeEd and how we want to be engaged in this conversation today. So those that don't know, HomeEd is the City of Edmonton's nonprofit housing corporation. Been around a while. 1977 was our origination. But since that time, it's really been a focus on providing homes that Edmontonians love and can afford. An emphasis on quality as well as affordability. But I think, something deeper than that we as a team have really leaned into is just this wicked need that exists in Edmonton for more quality, affordable housing. And I think that's really driven us to be as purpose-driven as we can be. And that really comes back to the fact that just better housing can't wait. And we always want to be an organization that really gets after it and tries to figure out better ways to do things. That goes to how we manage our properties, but also how we engage within the community and foster a sense of belonging within the city that we love. And with that in mind, we've really been pushing towards how can we reimagine the landscape of affordable housing. We do believe it can be sustainable. We do believe we can grow the supply of affordable housing. And we do believe that at the end of the day, every Edmontonian should value affordable housing, whether they live in it or they live beside it or just sort of see a broader context that this is valuable for our city. So that's what we're about and where we're going. And we continue to grow. So to date, we've got over 23 sort of significant properties that are home to over 2,900 residents. And that number is growing fast with a range of acquisitions that we've done in recent years, such as this beautiful property, Rundle Reeve Crossing, as well as new developments, which are sprinkling up all over Edmonton, some of which are referenced here. We've got our beautiful Parkside North townhome complex, which is coming online. We invited our first residents in a couple of weeks ago, and it's going to be 91 net zero townhomes. We've got another net zero ready concept in Ogilvy Ridge on the south side of Edmonton that should be welcoming residents in 2027. We are a fortunate beneficiary of a surplus school site over in Lymburn, and we're getting excited about a design concept to bring prospectively about 110 new homes into that community. And we've got a property that we're looking at as a redevelopment opportunity over in the Capilano area that we think can be a beautiful addition to the community. So we intend to be active, and we are active, but it's a matter of doing things right. And that to us really comes back to how can we ensure that people value the space that they live, but also the neighbors value the context that they are living in as well. So that's what we're all about, what we're doing today. And I'll offer it over to Laura.
Thanks, Nick. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm here to talk about Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues and give a little bit of background about what community leagues are for some of you that might not be aware. The Community League movement started in actually 1911, with Crestwood Community League being the first community league in the city. And shortly after, in about 10 years, there was 12 of them across the city. They realized that they needed a federated model, an overarching body to help them to advocate and sort of do work on their behalf. And so EFCL, the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues, was formed in 1921. So we're celebrating 105 years this January, which is exciting. There's 163 community leagues across the city of Edmonton. And a community league is really an independent, nonprofit, neighborhood-driven organization. It sits in the neighborhood. It is driven by the people that live there. It is run by the folks that care about the community deeply. And our role as EFCL is to ensure that they have the support and the tools to run an effective organization, to engage well with the community around them, and to respond to the needs of people that live in their community. So we've been at this for a while, but this is our sort of general slide that talks a bit about who we are. The city of Edmonton, we have a really close relationship with them. In the city, we're really fortunate in Edmonton to have this model. This is very unique across the country. This doesn't exist anywhere else, where we have such a network as well as an organization that supports that network. The city of Edmonton does provide a little bit of funding to each of the community leagues across the city to operate and to have events and programs and to help support some of their basic operational costs. And the leagues are places that are open to everyone. It doesn't matter your culture, it doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter, your status in the community in any way, shape, or form. You're welcome at the community league. You're welcome to be a member of the league and to attend any events. And that's something that's really unique in this day and age, to try to break down some of those barriers for folks and say where you live matters. Because you share this geography together, we are connected, we are neighbors, and that's a really important relationship. Next slide, just to give a bit of context, over those 100 years that leagues have been around, they have built an incredible amount of amenities across our city. So there are 250 playgrounds that sit adjacent to community leagues. They have 46 basketball courts, community gardens, and spray parks. So these are amenities that are right in the neighborhood, places where people already will come together, bump into each other, get to know their neighbors. On the next slide, we've got a few others. We have 126 halls across our city. So those halls are often more in more established neighborhoods, but we've seen recently Cameron Heights Community League just built their hall this summer. Oak Hills Community League near Terwilliger built their hall. So more and more, we're seeing this continued interest and need for neighbors having places to come together that is meaningful for them, close to home. Again, we're getting ready for winter. We have 119 outdoor skating rinks across the city. Those are the boarded ones. On top of that, leagues will often do snowbank rinks. And so you'll see those little snowbank rinks pop up as well. So again, leagues are really interested and very passionate about bringing people together in the community. In the bottom left there, we built a plaza at Horilac Park that tells our story. We are thrilled that this park is going to open again this spring, and so we welcome you all back down to Horilac Park to come and see our plaza and see the story of community leagues over the past 100 years. So that's EFCL.
Very well, thanks, Laura. And I think what we wanted to do today was sort of bring together two organizations I think have a shared sort of sense of purpose when it comes to how do we facilitate a thriving city that really is based on a sense of community. And all neighborhoods are different, and all Edmontonians are different, and yet there is an opportunity here to think about particularly affordable housing development as a catalyst for communities, but also for a conversation about how can we use the prospective development and or ongoing operation of housing in the community as a chance to kind of really engage in healthy relationships and strong relationships going forward. So before we kind of get into that, I think we kind of want to ask the obvious question, and really, why should we even care about that? Like, well, what is it about building a sense of community that really should matter? And so, Laura, maybe from your perspective, why should we care?
Yeah, it's a good question, Nick, because I think sometimes it's easy to think, well, I'm providing a service. I'm building a building in the neighborhood, and there's a strong need in our community for more housing. But I think it's once that building is built, it's those relationships that matter, right? It's that ongoing relationship that the residents want, that we want them to have with the community at large. So we talk a lot about vibrancy, right? The EFCL's vision for the city is that vibrant community leagues are going to lead to a vibrant city. And what does that actually mean? Like, what does vibrancy mean? And I think about often, the way that our city is built sometimes can promote people to retreat into their backyards or retreat into parts of their homes where they don't, kind of come out and meet their neighbors. And we know more now than ever that social isolation isn't good for us, right? That we need to be out on our front porches. We need to have spaces where it's safe for our kids to run and be out in the community where there are eyes on them. That builds that trust. People get to know each other. And that sense of community is what helps people to feel a sense of ownership and connection to the community, right? If you know that you've met some folks at the playground and your kids have played together, they've invited you maybe to the next pancake breakfast that the community league is having, you feel a sense of connection. You feel like you belong there. And that'll help you when you're thinking about, everything from how you use your space to the events that you have maybe in your house or in your neighborhood, and feel like you're steward and you are responsible for that community. So I think about the importance of those connections early on, that sense of like inviting in, feeling like you belong to a community helps you to feel ownership of that community, pride in that community. And I think we have so many leagues that have done a really good job of building that sense of pride. And we want to make sure that the new folks will also feel that when they come in. So
yeah, I think that's really well said. And I think from my perspective, I think about community, like what is that? And I don't think it's about sameness. I think it's about a group of very diverse people with diverse characteristics, but they're connected maybe by geography, but also with a sense of care for each other. And I think that's really what we're trying to facilitate and support as much as anything, is that caring about people that are different than you, but also that you have a sort of a sense of connection to. And so I think there are some lovely outcomes that obviously come when people feel a sense of care. I think as a perspective of a housing provider, obviously there's a very practical interest in having people feel cared for. It obviously helps with their well-being and less stress and feeling like they're part of something or supported within, where they live is a huge factor that will ultimately set them up for success and hopefully help their families to feel like they're thriving and supported as well. And at the end of the day, for a property manager such as HomeEd, I mean, that obviously results in less turnover, and
Right.
turnover typically has costs and challenges in itself. So the more that we can limit that, obviously there's less challenges and less complexity for us to manage, and the less cost that comes with that, it's even more subsidization that we can go and offer people back. And it kind of creates this healthy flywheel wherein people feel great about where they live, and are caring for where they live and want to be where they live. At the end of the day, that allows us to continue to support that and contribute even more to make that even a better experience, be it through better rent subsidization and ongoing engagement that really makes them feel like this is the place for me today and tomorrow. So I think that's our sort of view on why this is important for us as effectively a landlord, but more so as an interested community builder that has a presence all through the city. So
Well, and I think that's so important, Nick. Sorry, just to build on what you said, because I think oftentimes folks will look at affordable housing and think these are people that are just going to come in for a year or two and leave. And I think that can be very true for some people. And I think you're right, as if we can really get ahead of that and really help people feel that sense of belonging there. We know that people that are in apartment buildings or rental buildings will often not vote as readily. Their voter turnout is low. They don't feel like they have a say in their community. And I think the Community League is a really amazing conduit to help them quickly feel connected, have a sense of autonomy, have a voice in their community about things that they would like to see as well. And my hope as well, Nick, is that folks will stay longer, that they'll stay and put down those roots and feel those longer term connections for all the reasons you said. I mean, I get it from a builder perspective, around the costs are important, but I think from a league perspective, I mean, relationships matter. People want to build relationships that are meaningful to them and that are there for the longer term. So Thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you said something really important there. When we're thinking about it from an entry into a community, it really comes in the form of a new development typically, and there's a lot of considerations that come with that. I think at the end of the day, for us to create a sense of community and around these, it really does come back to relationships. So, I think you've had plenty of experiences and heard lots from your community league representatives and Edmonton's and Tony's broadly about maybe what's working, what's not working. So maybe from your perspective within the development cycle, like how can we go about building better relationships?
Yeah, it's, there's no magic formula, right? But I do believe that the sooner the better, right? And I always say that as soon as you know that you've got that space or that land, or you've got a, initial plan, get out there and meet that community league. And if you can't reach them, that's what we're here for. And I always say, because sometimes leagues are, again, they're full of people who are very passionate about their community, but they're volunteers for the most part. And they aren't always as responsive as sometimes developers want them to be. And so if you have trouble, you always reach out to us. But I always think, the earlier the better. The earlier you can have the conversation, you can talk a little bit about what what you're building, and be really honest from the beginning, right? Like be really honest about what the parameters that you have are. I think often, community assumes that developers have a lot of money, that they can just, make all the changes that they need to. Well, we don't like this type of siding. We want it to look like this kind of character of a building. And that's not always realistic for the developer who might have a very limited budget, right? And so I think being really honest in the beginning as to what you can do, but really hearing from the community what they're interested in seeing. I think about, there was one community league who talked about, there was a new development being put on a parkland in Parkland. This was a few years ago, and it was going to go right where there was a natural trail where part of the community would walk to this, it was like a 7-Eleven convenience store. And we know how people get through their neighborhood. Sometimes they use the sidewalks and sometimes they use the shortcuts. And so this building was going to go right where that shortcut was. And I really appreciated what the builder did in that moment. So I said, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that this, where I'm going to put this building. And so was able to design how they structured the building so that there was a sidewalk that was maintained around the condos in a way that still allowed for that kind of shortcutting, kept the building sort of still secure and met the needs of the builders and the tenants, but it was a way that could listen to what the community was saying. Is like, we've been using this space, we have a connection here. And I think things like that really go a long way. If you can make little tweaks, if you can think about, oh yeah, we are really close to that playground, and maybe a bench or two on this side would really, really help for people who want to watch their kids. What are the amenities that you can come to the table with? Hearing what the concerns are from the neighborhood. So I really think the earlier that's done, the better. And then to keep it up, right? Don't just show up at one point and then, and then just build and then off you go. Is that this is a long-term relationship. And so, those regular every couple months kind of check-ins, I think are so important. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot that really resonated with me and sort of the experiences that we've had at HomeEd. I think we've been very active, particularly in the last few years, of thinking about development and been engaging with a lot of communities in different ways and learning a lot as we've gone along. I think there's a couple things that I think you mentioned there that really come back around to it. And it starts with, being willing to engage. And I think the city of Edmonton is, I think in my mind, rightfully changed some of the parameters that say what you do or don't have to do. And affordable housing has typically had a requirement of a good neighbor plan, which has changed. And I think that's a good thing. But at the same time, I think we would want to have those types of engagements and thoughtful, honest, discussions and frameworks by which we are going to kind of collaborate. But I think it's within the frame of building a relationship. And I think the thing that we've noted right off the hop is it's tough to build a relationship on shaky foundation. And that shaky foundation typically comes with the historical context of a site. And, we had an example come through where we've been developing now in Ogilvy Ridge, and there had been 8 years of previous city-led engagement in and around what could happen on this site, where could it go, lots of very interested parties along that, and maybe some bumps along the way, just in terms of, the community feeling it should go this direction versus that direction. And that's all before we kind of came on the scene and pursued an opportunity to secure that site. And so it would have done us no good not to honor that history. And that really came to us to really investigate and understand who heard what at what point. What are you coming into this conversation with? And the reality is we have to own that history too, because as much as, even HomeEd being a city-owned entity, the work that may have come before us is really the context that we are going to operate in moving forward. And so regardless of who did what beforehand, how well it went, we need to live with it now and appreciate that, because people have very, very thoughtful intentions when it comes to asking good questions and looking for, certain outcomes in these developments, and doesn't do us any good not to honor that, not to, or to ultimately dismiss that. We need to engage, understand it, and own it going forward. I think something you also said there is really participating in that process and reaching out to the community, and framing that as be at the table. But I think, there is a conversation that needs to be had genuinely about what is on the table. And as you alluded to, there are certainly some limitations that come with what an affordable housing developer can do. And that may exceed even that which a market developer can do, because, I lovingly like to describe affordable housing development as kind of doing market housing with your hands tied behind your back. And there are a lot more constraints, as well as social outcomes, environmental outcomes, that come with some of the funding sources that we pursue. We need to make that happen. And there are just certain things that we got to do to be able to make that happen. So there are certainly things that I think are off the table in these conversations, but I think we owe it to the community to be upfront with that, and then to frame our engagement in such a way that, they have a good, healthy opportunity to influence that which is on the table. And a good example of that, I think, back to this Ogilvy Ridge experience, is, we pursued that opportunity with a rezoning application in mind. And so we had the capacity there to explore whether this could be an apartment complex or a townhome complex. And this is an actual picture there. You're seeing blocks being kind of stacked up within the space. And we gave people the opportunity to kind of really lean into that experience and tell us what they liked within some of the constraints that we had. And we got some great feedback that really ultimately pushed us to pursuing a townhome concept relative to apartments, which really was in the spirit of what the community was looking for. And ultimately, we could achieve the goals that we had still through that. So I think that was a good win, but really done in the context of this is what's on the table versus not, and let's be thoughtful but engaged in that process. That's a couple of things I'd say. Just as, we have to acknowledge that it is a two-way street. Sometimes we do these engagements, and the perception sometimes feels like, well, I'm coming here to tell you what I want, and yet that's not really why I think we're there. I think it's really about forming a relationship. My expectation is typically we're going to make something happen. And while we're open to collaboration to a degree, this is really the first chance for us to start building that foundation of a relationship that will hopefully last for decades and decades to come. So let's start appreciating our perspectives and your perspectives, our needs and your needs. And the thing we tend to find is those are very common needs. Those interests are common. Safety in the community, right? Thoughtful traffic considerations and access point considerations, good forms of communication and processes by which we can continue to have a healthy dialogue through the development and beyond is crucial. And that's a two-way street that we like to walk, and it's important that we have expectations as a housing provider or residents in lieu of their participation in that process, have a chance to kind of put what they're looking for on the table too. So the example in the corner there is, what does it mean to be a good neighbor? Well, that's as much of a question of what the community wants maybe of us, and I'm speaking to the neighbors of this future development, to back towards them as, what are you willing to commit to, and what is this going to look like if we can establish a common ground that allows this to be a healthy, positive relationship going forward.
Yeah,
so
no, that makes so much sense, Nick. And I think, going back to that two-way street, right? It's a two-way street on both sides. And I would say sometimes I've seen developers who will have really good engagement sessions, and they definitely draw out the people who are really interested in that development. And what I would say too is that leagues will often have a whole bunch of different events throughout the year. And so I'd really encourage developers to reach out to the league and say, what other events can I come to? Right? So that you will reach out to different people, maybe just have a table, just be there, because to your point, building that relationship is also about meeting people where they're at, right? They might not, they maybe can't come on that Saturday afternoon that you're having your engagement session, but they're going to be at the pub night on Friday night. So that is where it would be great for you to be there. And so I think, meeting the community where they're at as well at different events too will help. And I love that question. Like, what does it mean to be a good neighbor? Both ways. So if you're the one that's right beside this new development, how can you help? How can you help us to welcome these people? The built form will be done, and that's often what gets people pretty excited at the beginning, but then there will be a family or people that live there that really want to have that sense of community. They want to feel safe in their new space, and they're going to want to meet people. So yeah, I think that exercise is a really important one.
Well, sure. And I think it creates opportunities to do the last thing on there, which in our mind is to educate, right? Mm-hmm. There's always people moving into the community and around you. And so as much as we might have covered this in a first engagement or that first, touch point we had,
changes.
There's going to be similar questions that will come from anyone that's sort of coming in. So again, owning the history, but also looking for every opportunity just to clarify as best we can, because there's always fair angst when it comes to something new happening in around you, a new neighbor, whether it's just in the house next door or a larger development. And so how do we kind of create those opportunities for ongoing education and people up to speed with where things are at quickly? But lastly, also looking for opportunities to celebrate the progress together, because I think these relationships are an investment of time and it's work in a sense to have a healthy relationship. And when we're going through those sort of sometimes difficult conversations and experiences, we want to look for the wins within that. And so anytime we can celebrate with a grand opening or, these sort of shared experiences that maybe aren't so much about the development as much as they are about just getting to know each other and appreciating each other. I think that's another way of celebrating the success, because that's ultimately what forms the basis for a healthy community going forward. So, and I think the going forward question is another thing we wanted to talk about, because obviously there's lots of conversation about development in the city right now, whether it's affordable housing or not. But past a certain point, like that's the short part of the dance. The long part of the dance is the years and years to come in the community. And I think there's a lot of strategies that go to fostering that sense of community, over the long term, and creating connections that will hopefully allow that community to thrive. So curious from your perspective, Laura, and what you're hearing in the community leagues around how we might go about that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a long-term relationship in so many ways, and I think about an example we had recently with a housing provider in a community. They hosted a meeting and they invited the leaders of the leagues nearby, the presidents of the leagues nearby, and they were having this really great conversation. And the housing provider said, well, what sort of events do you have? And the presidents, rattled off all these things from different classes that they held weekly to different events that they had on weekends. And then they said, well, can the folks in here join? And it seems so simple to the league folks. They were like, well, of course. But again, sometimes it just needs to be that invitation in, right? And so I think it was a really interesting moment where they realized that they were there, that they lived there, and so could access those things. And so I think breaking down some of those barriers, again, we've said this a couple times, but having those relationships from the beginning and sharing information back and forth, leagues are great at social media, right? Following their Facebook pages, following their Instagram pages. That's where the information is going to be about what they're offering. But I think from a league perspective is welcoming those new people in with the membership cards, right? We talked about maybe at the beginning. That free membership gets you, free swimming a couple times a week. It gets you access to discounts at different stores and businesses, often in the community. If you want to get a, pass to a rec center, you get a discount. So just really talking about what those memberships can bring to help, again, continue that year over year. So it's not just at the beginning that we're all going to, have a big celebration and welcome you in, but it's every year. Let's touch base. Let's have our AGMs. Let's invite each other to our general meetings. Let's make sure we're talking about, what it is we're doing. And just that reaching out. So I think the operation is really important. Those inviting each other to each other's events, talking regularly, whether that's setting up a regular meeting time, maybe it's once a year just to check in, touch base, and just making sure that the communication is open. You talked about traffic safety, talk about safety, period, in the community. Those things evolve and change depending on the neighborhood itself. And so I think continuing those conversations will help to ensure that it's, you're all going in the same direction and that you're helping each other out.
Yeah, well, couldn't agree more. And obviously we've got some experiences together that have sort of demonstrated, I think, the value of that type of approach. And, from our view as a housing provider who obviously is in service to residents, but also the neighbors around them, like you said, sometimes they just don't know, like people are busy. Right. And they maybe don't even appreciate the value that's there until, it sort of is really put on a platter for them. And it serves our interest as well as the community leagues and everyone more broadly when that connection happens. So, we've really taken to trying to structure thoughtful events within our means and really maximizing, the audience there as best as we can. We're inviting residents, but we've also now collaborated with EFCL and the local community league, wherever these properties are, to have a presence. And the offer to kind of connect in with the community league has always been there, and it's been extremely welcomed. And like you said, it's an aha moment that sometimes it just never occurred. Well, wow, these are a lot of resources that exactly what I'm looking for. And we try and take that a step further with some of the other partnerships that we have. Certainly there's a big city waste program going on, and there's always questions about that. And people love for their communities to be clean, safe and healthy. And so having a presence there so people understand what's going on is really good. We have the City of Edmonton Neighborhood Empowerment team come through, and they really bring a safety lens to the community more broadly and offer tips and resources to kind of connect that through. And we've got a great relationship with Edmonton Police Service. All of our properties are underneath the crime-free prevention program, wherein there are expectations that we're going to engage within the community and have our friends within the force and who are sort of local in nature come through and make sure people are aware of what's available to them and that they are supported because we have that very shared sense of purpose that comes with a safe community, a thriving community, and all of these stakeholders can contribute to that. So putting that in front of people and giving them opportunities in different ways, whether it's events that you're hosting,
Yeah.
the league, but we're hosting, communications that can be shared. Really, I think,
Newsletters, yep, that sort of
having
thing.
huge value. And I think at the end of the day, like when we do that, our outcomes are better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The relationships that get formed in advance of even an odd
In the planning.
right? Like it's having a basis to kind of connect in with somebody when things start to feel a little bit off, right? And you can address it so much more quickly and thoughtfully if you have sort of a rapport already with an organization such as a league, a representative, or connection into service, or some of these other empowerment programs. So I think that's just what a community should be all about, is really having those connections in place, because at the end of the day, it's for a sense of common care for this neighborhood that we're all a part of, and really does help people to thrive. So that's really been our experience to date, something that we're going to continue to look at doing in the years ahead, and trying to make that even bigger. I mean, I still remember the event, and I think it's the picture on the bottom left there. We did that, I think, the Lakeview Community League, and big barbecue and the jumpy castle, and again, our interest wasn't much more than just let's get some people together and start talking, but just the amount of connections and just the joy that really came from that experience in itself, I think has only grown from that point on. So I think this is where organizations like ours can really play a role in facilitating that sense of community, strengthening things on the ground, and ultimately leading to happier and healthier residents and neighbors. So.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. No, I think it's been great. And I wanted to point out Melissa Campbell is actually watching here today. She's our community activator with a focus on community engagement. She's in the bottom right picture there too. And I know she's really appreciated a lot of the work and the efforts that HomeEd has done with the leagues, and has heard firsthand from the leagues how much they really appreciate, and didn't know enough about the folks that live there, or the whole the structure of how HomeEd operates. And so I think, again, to your point earlier, like, don't assume because you've done one engagement or one session 1 year that's the same. Our community leagues will turn over regularly. The board members will change. And so continuing to have those conversations just results in so many great things. So yeah, thanks, Nick. It's been a learning. We keep learning together, and I'm glad we can do it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think lastly, I'd say, like, there's a platform here that can be expanded, and we don't have to put it's not a burden, but just the emphasis always just on the leagues and the housing providers, right? There's lots of different organizations who I think have really real interests in these communities, and may have things going on themselves, and maybe you don't want to host a big event, but maybe just as a point of connection, reach out to some of these housing providers, reach out to your leagues and say, hey, this feels like a good thing. How can we foster that? How can we participate in that? And potentially resource for some of that too. So that's our hope and our goal, and yet that's work that I think where the juice is going to be worth the squeeze, and hopefully stuff that we'll continue to do. But with that, I think those were kind of the big heavy questions that we wanted to kind of dig in on, and certainly would welcome conversation with anybody online who wants to pose something back, be it an additional idea or a critique of that which we've offered here today, as well as any questions and maybe the experiences that Laura's had with the community leagues, as well as we've had as both a housing developer and a housing operator throughout the city. So I got to figure out how to look at these questions. I know we have somebody who's a bit intrigued here about just community leagues more broadly, and is wondering if there's a way to view this later. And there are a recording here, and I believe that all gets uploaded onto the Housing Month website in short order. So this will live on. So we got a question hear about 15-minute cities. And do you feel like these are going to affect the community leagues? All right, any thoughts?
Oh, well, I mean, I think in so many ways our community leagues are already what 15-minute cities are driving to be, right? I mean, I often think about folks will say that Edmonton feels like a small town to them. And I really do believe that that's because of the amount of amenities that are close to people's homes in Edmonton. Because of the way that the leagues are structured, the licensed land is often on the piece of parkland that's been put aside by the developer of the neighborhood. And that often is in the central part of the neighborhood. So, you know, there's usually a school nearby. So I think leagues, especially, and I should be really clear, in our more established parts of the city. So within the Henday, I would say definitely leagues tend to have more of that 15-minute city feel, right? You can generally walk, bike, roll, short drive, you know, to most things within your neighborhood. In some of our newer neighborhoods that are on the outskirts where the leagues haven't maybe developed a hall or haven't developed their amenities in the same way, I would say that it just feels different. But I can't tell you, I mean, every week I have conversations with leagues that want to have a building, that want to have a way to put up a picnic shelter so that they have a place where people can gather. So I think the 15-minute concept fits very beautifully already with what leagues are really focused on. Neighbor connections, close to home, know everyone nearby, and make sure that you focus on, you know, that there is in your neighborhood somewhere where you can get some basic groceries, that there is somewhere where you can have recreation with your family, that you can have those things that are core to making your quality of life as good as it can be within a close proximity. Yeah.
I'll just add from our perspective as a housing developer and operator, like we're actively pursuing those types of opportunities where we can, you know, complement that which already exists from an amenity standpoint and interconnection underneath this sort of 15-minute city umbrella, because I think that just serves our residents so well, you know, to be sort of well integrated with everything that they need close by, but also, you know, that broader sense of community that comes with having a league in short distance, and as well as all those sort of, you know, features that really make a community thrive. And so we'll continue to look for those types of development opportunities, and hopefully that only, you know, facilitates better outcomes for our residents, but also keeps the city moving down that path to, you know, these 15-minute kind of neighborhoods, and I think that's core to what the city plan is really looking for as well. Well, we'll offer a last minute or two if there are any questions that anyone wants to sneak in for the deadline here. But I think as we've reflected on this in preparation, you know, just a conversation, I think that, you know, I'm really happy to see being had in a lot of these communities. Laura, I know there is a big push happening across the city to develop out these surplus school sites. Obviously, Home Ed is one of the parties involved in pursuing one of those. And you know, is there anything from your perspective you feel like is an added consideration or anything more that you want to reinforce just from a league perspective as those are being developed? It seems like a lot of what we talked about today would be just as relevant as ever, but anything else you wanted to offer there?
Well, I mean, I think we touched on it, Nick, but I mean, those affordable, those surplus school sites, pardon me, you know, were designated so long ago, right? If I think about the initial engagement that was done with some of those communities, and so it was tough on a lot of leagues, right? It was tough that it had felt like it was dormant for so long, and then suddenly it was brought back to life. So I think, you know, those were some tough conversations for communities to have. And I think what I have a lot of hope for is, I think as a city, so many of us clearly now understand, because we've seen this in every part of our city now, the need for housing. And the need for housing quickly, that there are too many people in our city that are houseless, and that the solution here is to build housing now. And so I really I think I hear more and more conversations that leagues are having around, how do we make this work? How do we do this? Whereas, when I first joined the EFCL 7 or 8 years ago, it was more around, I know that development doesn't fit here. I think we've changed that conversation to understanding like we need it. And I think as Edmontonians, we all know we need it. And so now it's just how do we do it well together, and how do we kind of keep that relationship strong? So the surplus school sites has been a tough one for a lot of leagues, but I'm excited to start working with the developers that have been chosen. We have definitely made sure that the developers and the leagues have been connected, and city administration's pretty involved in making sure that those connections are strong. So we'll keep tabs on it just to make sure it's moving in the right direction. Nick, as you and I have said, just because you don't hear from someone doesn't mean that they don't care. It just means you haven't heard from them. So reach out again, right? Reach out, because when you don't hear, we make assumptions, but we need to make sure that people are in the loop on everything. So
yeah, I think just a transformational opportunity in so many of these communities. But I think what resonates and what you said to me is, there's a chance for better, right? Like, and that goes to our purpose statement. Better housing can't wait. Like, it's one thing to slap some roofs up and here and there, but how we do it and how we build for belonging and how we build to last, right, is really a difference. And I think how we're trying to go about it. And if we're not careful, that these types of opportunities can have detrimental effects. And so I think we've got some great organizations kind of moving forward on these, but I think this is really where the rubber's going to hit the road, and a chance for us to be at our best and deploy some of these I think learnings that certainly we've seen within our leagues, within our housing providers, within our communities, to the betterment of Edmonton. Because at the end of the day, this is something we definitely need, but we can aspire to be better every day. So I think the last question we'll just sneak in before the time runs out here is any additional thoughts on how smaller or more rural communities can encourage, support their sense of community without community leagues, designated spaces for gathering purposes, or capacity or resources for this? So it's that tricky question wherein, we're a bit stretched, and whether it's outside of Edmonton or even just some of the smaller neighborhoods, how do they go about this? Laura, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do have relationships with the agricultural societies of Alberta. And I mean, every small town has an agricultural society that, is responsible for building the curling rink or the rec center or the outdoor rink. And so I would say that would be your equivalent to a community league outside of the city. So if you're building in rural Alberta, absolutely, that's who you want to connect with. And they animate spaces in the same way. They definitely run bigger spaces, right? So there may be more operations as opposed to animators. But I think those would be your best bet. In terms of if you're building like in a new neighborhood, say in Edmonton, that you're not sure of where the community league is, on our website, you can just put in your postal code and it'll identify what league is associated with that area. And definitely some of our leagues that are in newer areas are stretched pretty thin right now. Our city's growing really quickly. And so some of those community leagues are supporting 4, 5, 6 neighborhoods. And so, we do work with groups of Edmontonians all the time who want to form a new community league. We've developed 7 of them in the last 5 years. So it continues to be a model that grows. And so if you're in a part of the city that you're not sure, feel free to reach out to us. And if you're in a rural community, again, I would say go to the Ag Society. That would be your closest equivalent. So hope that helps.
Yeah, and I would hope that, anyone could view themselves as a leader of a community conversation as well, right? And the formality of the league certainly would help, but to the degree that you're got some stakeholders around you, vested interest, be it within the schools that we have, within the organizations such as housing providers in the neighborhood, we want similar things. And so, how can we strike up a conversation and start small? And doesn't have to be massive events or things that happen every week, but just the start of a conversation, I think is where you're going to start to see the value happen, and then hopefully that only builds from here. So I think with some intention, we can take small steps, and hopefully those lead to big ones. And and see the leagues kind of contribute once we've hit some of that critical mass. Okay, well, Laura, I want to thank you for taking a little time here today. And
Oh, thank you. It's been great.
Conversations I know we've had, and I know we'll continue to have as we think about how we really do foster a sense of community in and around affordable housing, but all throughout this city, which we obviously love and only want better things for. So thanks everyone for taking some time with us today, and continuing down this path towards healthy, thriving communities and a better city of Edmonton. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Oh, maybe throw it on to the next slide, Nick. We did have our official websites there, and then if anyone,
oh yes, yeah.
I mean, just to make it official, if you're trying to reach out to us, there's the websites, and all the contacts and information are there. So yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks Nick for you and your team for helping put this together. And yeah, it's been good.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone.